All right, so anyone who's listening to this probably wants to get a handle on how China Unicom did in 2023. We're talking really understanding it, not just the headlines. You want to know how the different parts of their business are doing, like what their financials are saying, and how they plan to keep their shareholders happy.
Right, we're going to go beyond just the headlines.
Yeah. So to do that, today we're diving deep into their 2023 annual report.
Exactly.
So let's kick things off by talking about their two main business segments.
Okay.
They've got connectivity and communications, or CC, and then they've got computing and digital smart applications, which is CDSA. So CC, that sounds pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah,
It's their mobile and broadband services. That's like their core offering.
absolutely. It's their bread and butter, the foundation of everything they do. But what's interesting to me is how they're using that foundation to build out CDSA.
Right.
So CDSA, you can think of that as their engine for future growth. They're using big data and 5G to create these really innovative solutions across a ton of different sectors.
And it's not just like a small little experiment they're doing over there. They've got over 30,000 5G projects in 71 different economic sectors.
Yeah, that's massive.
Like, that's huge.
It is, and it shows they're really putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to innovation. That they're not just talking about it, they're actually doing it. So, we're talking about industrial internet, smart cities, even digital government platforms.
Yeah, one thing that I saw that really stood out to me was their Digital Village initiative.
Oh, yeah.
It shows that they're not just focused on big cities and flashy tech.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually using their technology to try and connect rural communities, bringing over 250,000 villages onto this digital platform.
I love that. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It shows a commitment to sort of a bigger purpose, using technology for social good, not just profit.
Right.
And, speaking of pushing the boundaries, they've even gotten into AI with their Yanjing LLM system.
Oh, wow.
So clearly they're looking to be ahead of the curve, ahead of the game.
It sounds like they're making some pretty serious moves in the tech space.
Definitely.
But how is all of this translating into their financial performance?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the good news is they had a really strong year. Their revenue increased by 5%, reaching RMB 372.60 billion.
Wow, not too shabby. What were some of the key drivers behind that growth?
So their service revenue had a really healthy growth of 5%, hitting RMB 335.17 billion.
Okay.
And this tells us that their core business is still strong. And no surprise here, data services played a major role in this. They've actually held over 50% market share in data services for 5 years running.
Really?
That's amazing. That consistent dominance is pretty impressive, wouldn't you say?
For sure. So they're not just holding steady, they're dominating that space.
Yeah.
But strong revenue is one thing. What about their profitability? What are the key metrics that we should be paying attention to there?
Well, EBITDA, which is always a good indicator of operational strength.
Yeah.
And they reported an EBITDA of RMB 99.81 billion.
Yeah.
And this just tells us that they're managing their operations really well. Oh, and get this, their dividends reached a record high this year.
Sound like they're keeping those shareholders pretty happy. But before we get too excited, let's actually break down these financials even more. We've got the income statement, the balance sheet, the cash flow statement, and free cash flow. I know I'm ready to get into the numbers, but I'm hoping we can do this in a way that I can understand.
All right, let's unpack it. Let's break it down. Starting with the income statement, we see that 5% revenue growth we were talking about. Data services are playing an even bigger role. Their EBITDA margin remains stable at 29.8%.
Okay.
Which shows they're maintaining profitability even while they're growing, which is good.
Right, so it's not just a fluke, they're actually doing it right.
Yeah.
What about the balance sheet? Any red flags there, or are we in the clear?
No red flags here. Their liabilities to assets ratio is a very healthy 46.5%, which basically means that they're not overly reliant on debt to run their business. Plus, their total assets have grown, reaching RMB 661.05 billion, which means they're expanding their base.
Got it. So now cash flow,
Yes.
the lifeblood of any business, right? What's the story there?
Their operating cash flow came in at a strong RMB 102.39 billion, which shows that their core operations are generating a lot of cash. But here's where things get really interesting. Their capital expenditure was RMB 73.87 billion. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's not small change. Where's all that cash going?
It's a sign that they're very seriously investing in their future growth. specifically in 5G and CDSA. So they're putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, that makes sense with what we were talking about earlier with all their different initiatives. Now, free cash flow, isn't that like a really crucial indicator of their financial health?
It is.
Yeah.
Free cash flow is basically what's left over after covering their essential capital expenditures. And China Unicom actually has a very positive free cash flow of RMB 28.52 billion. This means that they have flexibility. They can pursue new opportunities, they can pay dividends, or they can even buy back shares.
So they're in a strong position to kind of reward those shareholders.
Exactly. And speaking of shareholders, we talked about those record high dividends earlier.
Yeah.
Remember, they announced that final dividend of RMB 0.1336 per share for 2023.
Wait, on top of what they already paid out, right?
That's right.
With the interim dividend.
They already distributed an interim dividend of RMB 0.203 per share.
Okay.
So you can see they're really committed to returning value to investors.
So it seems like they're striking a good balance between reinvesting for growth,
Yep.
with CDSA and 5G and all that,
Yeah,
but also making sure to reward the shareholders that they have. But what about the road ahead?
right.
They've got big plans, but there's always challenges, right?
Always, yeah. So they've projected a capex of RMB 65.0 billion for 2024, and a big chunk of that is going towards CDSA. This goes along with what they've been saying. They want to keep that revenue growing steadily, but they're actually aiming for double-digit profit growth.
Wow.
Ambitious. And they're saying how important it is to build that strong network infrastructure and just keep strengthening their innovation capabilities. They're not resting on their laurels, that's for sure.
Some really ambitious goals.
Yeah.
But they have to be aware of the challenges that are out there, right?
Oh, of course.
The telecommunications market is only getting more and more competitive. There's always changing regulations. And then there's that global race for AI and 5G dominance. How do you think all of that is going to impact them going forward?
You're right. Those are challenges they can't just ignore. They've got to figure out how to work through all of those if they want to reach those ambitious goals.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot to unpack there. And that's exactly what we're going to do in part 2.
Yes.
We'll dig deeper into how they plan to create shareholder value, explore those potential challenges even more, and really assess what their overall prospects look like for the future.
Stay tuned because it's going to get really interesting. Welcome back. We left off talking about China Unicom's ambitious goals and some of the challenges they're facing.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how they're going for this aggressive growth,
Mm-hmm.
but also trying to keep those investors happy.
Right. It's a balancing act.
Yeah, it is. It's a tough one.
And the report highlights several ways they're approaching this. First, those dividends. We talked about the final dividend of RMB 0.1336 per share for 2023.
Right.
But remember, that's on top of the interim dividend of RMB 0.203 per share that they already paid out.
So shareholders are getting a pretty good chunk of change, huh? But dividends aren't the only way to create shareholder value, right?
Absolutely not. Companies can buy back their own shares,
Oh, right.
which reduces the number of shares that are out there.
Yeah.
And so what happens when there are fewer shares?
Each share is worth more.
Exactly, basic supply and demand. Plus, doing that can signal that the company thinks its stock is undervalued, which can boost investor confidence.
Interesting. So are they planning any share buybacks?
While the report doesn't mention any immediate plans, it does say they have a proactive and flexible approach to managing their capital.
Okay.
So that might mean buybacks are on the table for the future.
Yeah, they're keeping their options open. Okay, so let's switch gears a bit back to those challenges we were talking about earlier. The telecom landscape is getting more and more competitive. Those regulations are changing all the time. And that whole global race for AI and 5G is just heating up. How do you think all of that is going to impact them reaching their goals?
Well, the competition is definitely fierce. They've got pressure from companies at home and abroad, and they've got to be adaptable if they want to keep that market share. They can't rest on their laurels, especially with those big growth targets.
Yeah, they got to be on their game, innovating all the time.
Exactly.
What about those regulations? How is that affecting their strategy?
That's a big one, too. All the rules around data privacy, cybersecurity, and AI, they're changing all the time, both in China and around the world. So figuring those out is going to be super important to their success, especially as they're trying to grow internationally.
So they got to be smart, legally speaking.
You got it.
And what about that global race for AI and 5G? That's like a whole other level with some serious players.
Absolutely. They're investing a lot in those areas, but so is everyone else. It's not just other Chinese companies, it's global tech giants, too. It's a real race to the top.
Sounds like they're going to have to do more than just keep up. They're going to have to outrun everyone.
Yeah, pretty much.
What do you think? Do they have what it takes?
Well, they've definitely got the resources, they've got the people, and they've got the ambition. And they've definitely shown they're willing to put in the investment for future growth. They seem to get what's happening in the tech world.
But it's not a sure thing, right?
No, definitely not. There are always risks. You never know how the competition might change or what new tech might pop up or what new challenges they might face.
Yeah, things change so fast, you never know.
Uh,
So they have to be ready to adapt. But let's zoom out a bit and think about the big picture. What does China Unicom's journey mean for the global telecom industry and the tech world as a whole?
That's where it gets really interesting. If they really do become a leader in CDSA, it could have a huge impact. Think about them setting the standard for things like smart cities or industrial internet, even digital government.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to think about. But what if they don't pull it off? What if things don't go their way?
Well, that could open the door for other companies to take the lead. It could even slow down how fast those areas develop.
So there's a lot riding on them, not just for them, but for everyone.
Exactly. What we're seeing with them is kind of a mini version of what's happening in the whole tech world. Constant innovation, intense competition, and having to adjust all the time.
Yeah, it's like a chess match, but with really high stakes.
A great analogy. And in the last part of our deep dive, we'll explore those implications even more. We'll try to picture what the future might hold.
Sounds good. Stay with us for that. It's going to be thought-provoking stuff. Okay, we're back for the last part of our deep dive into China Unicom's 2023 annual report. We've talked about their business, their finances, how they're trying to make their shareholders happy, and even some of the things they're up against. Now it's time to step back and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, it's like China Unicom's story is a window into what's happening in the global telecom and tech industries.
Yeah.
We can see the future through them.
Okay, so let's look through that window. What are the implications of their growth and their strategy? Not just for them, but for everyone.
Think about their push into CDSA computing and digital smart applications. If they really take off in areas like the industrial internet, smart cities, and digital government, it could change the whole tech world.
So they're not just playing their own game, they could be setting the rules for everybody.
Exactly. Their success could mean a shift in power in tech. They could be challenging the big names and making everyone step up their game, like a new champion coming in to shake things up.
Wow, that's a big deal. And what about their hold on data services? How could that play out globally?
Well, data is like the new oil, right? And they've got a huge supply. Their knowledge of how to manage and use data could give them a big advantage in developing new tech and new ways of doing business. It's not just about connections anymore. It's about using all that data that flows through their networks.
So they're becoming masters of the data universe. They could shape how we use data on a global scale.
Right. This has implications for everything, from AI to medicine to online shopping. It's hard to overstate how big of a deal this could be.
It really is mind-blowing. But let's not forget the hurdles they face. What if they can't overcome those challenges? How would that impact the global tech scene?
That's an important point. Competition in telecom is tough everywhere. How well China Unicom does against rivals in China and around the world will have a big effect on the whole industry. If they stumble, someone else might take their place.
It's like survival of the fittest out there.
Definitely. And then there's the whole issue of regulations. Governments all over are trying to figure out data privacy, cybersecurity, and AI, so the rules keep changing. China Unicom needs to be able to handle these shifting regulations if they want to grow internationally.
It's a tough balancing act. They've got to be on point. So much depends on them succeeding, not just for their sake, but for the whole industry. What's your final take on their chances?
They've definitely got what it takes to be a major player globally. They're ambitious, they're putting in the money, and they understand how tech is changing. But their success depends on a few things. How well they implement their CDSA strategy, how well they can keep innovating and staying ahead of the competition, and how well they can navigate all these regulations.
So there's a lot of opportunity, but there are also risks along the way. It's like they're at a crossroads, and their decision will have a ripple effect way beyond their own company.
Exactly. What we're seeing with them is a snapshot of what's happening in the tech world overall. Huge ambition, constant innovation, fierce competition, and always adapting. It's a story that's just getting started.
Very well said. China Unicom's journey reminds us that the world of technology is unpredictable, always changing, and you have to be able to adapt and come up with new ideas to make it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into China Unicom's 2023 annual report. We hope you've learned something about their business, their strategy, and how they could impact the global tech world.
It's been a pleasure, and as always, we encourage you to keep learning and exploring the forces shaping our technological future.
And until next time, keep exploring. This is The Deep Dive, signing off.